All right, good afternoon, y'all, and welcome to this 2 o'clock session of our Saturday afternoon reading of Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality. Very glad to have y'all here with us. Always appreciate the fact that y'all can join us. If you happen to be here in the live reading, you can find a PDF of Inventing Reality in the pinned section of the Discord. And if you're following along on the YouTube, you can find that same PDF in the description. We are starting chapter 4 today. We actually did start today with reading it in the 11 o'clock session. But this is going to be the one that we actually record. So if we want to start chapter 4, we'll be good to go. And chapter 4 is called The Big Sale. Since Zoe started with this chapter last time, I'll go ahead and pick up so we don't have to read the exact same sections that we already read earlier. So, chapter 4, The Big Sale. Much of our media experience is neither news nor entertainment. Some 60 to 80% of newspaper space and about 22% of television time, even more on radio, is devoted to advertising. The average viewer who watches 4 hours of television daily sees at least 100 to 120 commercials a day, 36,400 a year, and 36,400 to 43,680 a year. Many of the images in our heads, the expression in our conversation, the jingles and tunes we hum, and of course the products we find ourselves using are from the world of the big sale. Advertising not only urges products upon us, we in part become one of its products. We are, if anything, consumers. And even if we have learned to turn away from the television set when commercials come on and pass over the eye-catching ads in our newspapers and magazines, we cannot hope to remain untouched by the persistent, ubiquitous bombardment. Most of us think advertising is a sideshow we must tolerate in order to experience the media's more substantial offerings. Advertising picks up most of the cost of newspapers and magazines and all the cost of radio and television. Thus, it is thought of as a means to an end. But a moment's reflection should tell us it is the other way around. The media's content, the news and entertainment, the features and specials are really the means to the lures to get us exposed to the advertisement. Journalists, said one representative, are just people who write on the back of advertisements. The end is the advertising, the process of inducing people to spend as much money as possible on consumer products and services. Entertainment and news are merely instrumental to the goal of the advertiser. They are there to win audiences for the advertisers, to keep people tuned in and turned on. The objective is commercial gain, the sale of mass-produced goods to a mass market. Only for that reason are advertisers willing to pay enormous sums for what passes as entertainment and news. Mass advertising has not always been with us. It grew with mass media, or rather, mass media grew with it. Mass advertising was a response to significant transformations in the productive system. The growth of modern technology and mass production brought changes in the lives of Americans. The small community with its local economy and homebred recreational and cultural life gave way to an urbanized industrial society of people who were obliged to turn more and more to a mass commodity market. The age of mass consumption came to the United States most visibly in the 1920s, interrupted by the Great Depression and World War II, then exploding upon us with accumulated vigor in the post-war era. With it came the advertising industry, called into being by the economic imperative of having to market vast quantities of consumer goods and services. Among the new products were those that enable advertising itself to happen. The printing press, newspaper, the low-price slick magazine, the radio, and finally the television set. All in their turn were to become both mass consumption items and prime conduits for mass consumption and advertising. Today, the family and local community are no longer the primary units for production, recreation, self-definition, or even personal loyalty. Self-images, role models, and emotional attachments are increasingly sought from those whose specialty is to produce and manipulate images and from the images themselves. So that's already interesting shit that we're talking about in section 1. I didn't realize that that was the data and just how many commercials that we were consuming. If you're watching 4 hours of television a day, and you're getting 120 commercials a day. Let's see. And you assume you're watching a bunch of, 30-minute shows, basically. That means, let's see. So let's see, there's 8 30-minute blocks divided by 20. Let's see. 120 divided by 8. Yeah, you're getting like 15 commercials a fucking show, give or take, if you're watching a bunch of like typically timed shows, which aren't even the full half-hour block, right? Typically, it's like 22, 23 minutes plus the fucking commercials. That's crazy as hell. And he said up to 43,680 a year. Like, are we paying to watch the damn show, or are we paying to be advertised to, and the show is just a bonus? Because that's almost starting to seem like how it is, when it comes to how they do commercials.
Yep, the show's just a bonus, and the advertisement is the real message.
Exactly. That's exactly what I see.
I think that last paragraph in this section is real interesting, too, because, he's talking about how people come to self-identify more with the brands they consume than with, their physical community or even their family.
Yeah, exactly. You talk about the one where it says today, the family and local community are no longer the primary units for production, recreation, self-definition, or even personal loyalty. Self-images, role models, and emotional attachments are increasingly sought from those whose specialty is to produce and manipulate image. Is he talking about how like commercials themselves move on from portraying the family to just portraying individuals who are like doing stuff that they want to do? Because even earlier he does it later, I think, where he's describing a person like, a commercial where a person's like skiing, and like that the whole message is like, you're being so like this horseshit, definition of freedom, and there's like a person skiing in the background and all the different facets of freedom he's experiencing: freedom to failure, freedom to succeed, freedom to try in the first place and shit. But like, that's totally like divorced from any kind of communal or family-based propaganda that they
it's more that this branding becomes like a part of your identity. Like, for example, I'm not just a Florida woman, I'm a Star Wars fan.
Because you're in Star Wars.
And I have a community of other Star Wars fans, and it's all built around this, freaking brand.
Yeah, or you're a Florida woman, so you must love Disney World or some shit like that.
Yeah, and it's a substitute for the earlier forms of, self-identification that people used to use. I'm from X town, I'm from X family. Instead of, talking with your neighbors about stuff that's relevant to the community, like you're talking with strangers on the internet about Star Wars, and that's what's important, that kind of shit.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's continue on, y'all. We got the consumer ideology. So the obvious purpose of ads and commercials is to sell goods and services, but advertisers do more than that. Over and over, above any particular product, they sell an entire way of life, a way of experiencing social reality that is compatible with the needs of a mass production, mass consumption, capitalist society. Media advertising is both a propagator and a product of a consumer ideology. People have always had to consume in order to live, and in every class society, consumption styles have been a measure of one's status. But modern consumerism is a relatively recent development in which masses of people seek to accumulate things other than what they need and often other than what they can truly enjoy. Consumption is no longer just a means to life, but a meaning for life. This is the essence of the consumer ideology. As propagated through mass advertising, the ideology standardizes taste and legitimizes both the products of the system and the system itself, representing the commodity written life as the good life in the American way. The consumer ideology or consumerism builds a mass psychology of moreness that knows no limit. Hence, the increase in material abundance ironically also can bring a heightened sense of scarcity and a sense of unfulfilled acquisition. Advertisements often do not explicitly urge the consumer to buy a given product, rather they promise that the product will enhance a person's life, opening a whole range of desiderata, desiderata, whatever, including youthfulness, attractiveness, social grace, security, success, conviviality, sex, romance, and the admiration of others. Strictly speaking, advertisement does not sell the product as such. Rarely does the television commercial say buy Pepsi. Instead, it urges us to join the Pepsi generation. That's some loaded language they're using to sell some shit. That's crazy. Zoe posted definition of desideratum, something desired as essential. Yeah.
Desiderata. I think it's desiderata.
Desiderata. Thank you. Desiderata. Okay, desiderata. All right, and then before we move on, there was a text box that we can read. What the commercials do not tell us. Commercials do not announce a product's price, nor accurately represent its size, weight, and dimensions. On the contrary, such features are intentionally distorted by tricks of staging, such as special camera angles and lighting, and by tricks of wording, such as family size or economy size. Product descriptions are vague and ambiguous. Ingredients, for example, are rarely mentioned, certainly not by generic name. On the contrary, they are often deliberately disguised by invented terms: pain reliever, anti-wetness spray product, cough suppressant, sleep remedy, germ chaser, and so on. Food and candy are described as chocolatey or peanutty, glossing over how much real chocolate or real peanuts are used, if any. Breakfast food are described as yummy, never as sugary. Who it is that produces products advertised on television often remains a mystery. Brand names are stressed, but not corporate ownership or affiliations. It is a rare television watcher who knows that the company producing Twinkies and Wonder Bread is owned by General Mills, that Creative Plaything is owned by CBS Inc., that White Cloud and Charmin, toilet paper rivals on the air, are both made by companies which Procter & Gamble owns. Fucking wow. For what reason does General Mills, a food and agricultural conglomerate, sell toys, while ITT, an international conglomerate that once specialized in communication, sells food? Commercials do not tell. Rose Goldson. That's from Rose Goldson, The Great American Consciousness Machine, from Journal of Social Reconstruction, published between April and June 1980. And that's on pages 98 and 99. Wow. Yeah, no, that is definitely the language they use when they're pitching stuff, huh? It's never any accurate descriptor, but like, you're meant to think of that stuff as accurate descriptors, so that you can feel like you're a knowledgeable consumer, all while you're actually kept super ignorant, Because, like, what does chocolatey really mean? Does it tell you how much chocolate? Does it tell you what else is in there? Does it tell you where the chocolate was sourced from? What kind of chocolate? Nope, just chocolatey. It's vague, and it makes you feel smart for being able to identify what chocolatey means. And that's the whole point. They don't have to tell you about all that other bullshit. They got you on chocolatey. They got you on peanutty or anti-wetness spray product. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? It's crazy as hell. Yeah. Most consumers, if questioned on the matter, would agree that many commercials are exaggerated, unrealistic, and even untrue. But this skepticism does not immunize them from the advertisement hype. One can be critical of a particular commercial, yet be swayed by it at some subliminal level, or by the overall impact of watching 1,000 commercials a week. Thus, millions of people bought high-priced designer jeans, even if few actually believed the product would win them into the never world of slim, hip, glamorous people who joyfully wiggled their blue denim posteriors into the TV camera in an endless succession of commercials during the early 1980s. The consumer ideology not only fabricates false needs, it panders in a false way to real ones. The desire for companionship, love, approval, and pleasure, the need to escape from drudgery and boredom, the search for security for oneself and one's family. Such things are vital human concerns. The consumer ideology does something more pernicious than just activate our urge for conspicuous consumption. Like so much else in the media and like other forms of false consciousness, consumerism plays on real human needs in deceptive and ultimately unfulfilling ways. One of the goals of advertising is to turn the consumer's critical perception away from the product and away from the system that produces it and toward herself or himself. Many commercials characterize people as loudmouth imbeciles whose problems are solved when they encounter the right medication, cosmetic, cleanser, or gadget. In this way, industry confines the social imagination and cultural experience of millions, teaching people to define their needs and lifestyles according to the dictates of the commodity market. The reading of advertising copy and the viewer of commercials discovers that they are not doing right for baby's needs or hubby's or wife's desires, that they are failing in their careers because of poor appearance, sloppy dress, or bad breath, that they are not treating their complexion, hair, or nails properly, that they suffer unnecessary cold misery and headache pains, that they don't know how to make the tastiest coffee, pie, pudding, or chicken dinner. Nor if left to their own devices, would they be able to clean their floors, sinks, and toilets correctly, or tend to their lawns, gardens, appliances, and automobiles. In order to live well and live properly, consumers need corporate producers to guide them. Consumers are taught personal incompetence and independence on mass market producers. That's fucking wild, because that's exactly how it is. We're about to talk about that in a second. Are people worried about the security of their homes and families? No need to fear. Prudential or Allstate will watch over them. Are people experiencing loneliness? My Bell brings distant loved ones to them with the telephone call. The corporate system knows what formulas to feed your infants, what foods to feed your family, what medication to feed your cold, what gas to feed your engine, and how best to please your boss, your spouse, your boss, or your peers. Just as the mass market replaced family and community as providers of goods and services, so now corporations replace parents, grandparents, midwives, neighbors, craftspeople, and oneself in knowing what is best. Big business enhances its legitimacy and social hegemony. So let's read the text box and then let's pause for discussion. So, meanwhile, south of the border, at the top of page 66. Meanwhile, south of the border, the sheer wealth and dynamism of American society clearly adds to Mexico's vulnerability. But United States business interests also play a key role in the Mexican economy. United States investors dominate the more invisible areas of automobile production, food processing, and domestic appliances, which in turn shape consumption patterns. Similarly, while the medium is controlled by Mexicans, the message of the American way of life dominates Mexican television, not only through the daily fare of Superman cartoons or live broadcast of American football games, but also through a style of advertising where American blondes are used to sell Mexican beer. Slick spots prepared by American advertising agencies expound the virtues of everything from Pepsi Cola to the Ford Mustang. The cultural impact of television was underlined in a recent survey carried out by the National Consumer Institute. It showed that 85% of the children questioned recognized the trademark of a brand of potato chips, but only 65% identified Mexico's national emblem. In another poll, only 14% recognized the monument of the revolution in Mexico City, but 70% identified the symbol of the brand of cornflakes. Enrique Rubio Lara, the Institute's director, noted recently, advertising is not only encouraging the sale of totally superfluous goods, but it is also stimulating aspirations, values, and models of life that are not the best for Mexicans. And that's from Alan Writing. Mexico's middle class turns to disco and burgers. New York Times, January 13, 1982.
In the 11 o'clock group, we were discussing how, this isn't just a phenomenon that, goes on in Mexico, which shares a border with the U.S. It's, this Americanization is happening all over the world. You see it all over the place in India, for example.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, you do. And you're told to value blonde, skinny white people by the same people who plan to use blonde, skinny white people to sell you a bunch of shit, that's wild, that's crazy. They'll be like, hey, your body image needs to be this, your hair color needs to be like that, your skin tone needs to be this, and then those are the same exact people they'll put on this fucking on this shit to try to put a bunch of shit in your home. I obviously knew that reality, but I hadn't necessarily understood that that's not just an American phenomenon. That's they're pitching this shit inside Mexico, probably in any place they can get a commercial aired overseas. That's pretty dastardly. So
it's a subtle reinforcement of U.S. hegemony and white supremacy.
For sure, exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at with that. So it's important to bring up some of this other stuff he was talking about up here too. These in the consumer ideology. So he's talking about people themselves being not just the target, but what's being sold. And we were just getting at that. And like, I think the thing that resonated with me most is how like he brings up just how they try to treat you as like a stupid, ignorant person in terms of like these advertisers. He brings up, because like I think about commercials and how they go about trying to sell something, and like my recollection of it is that they're always portraying, especially men, to be like incompetent, don't know what the fuck they're doing with what it is they were trying before. It'll be like he's scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing away at this stain in the shower or in the toilet, and like he can't get it. And then, like magic, you get this one product and you apply it to the thing, and just like and just like magic, the thing is fixed. Or somebody who cooks at home, like was just like not satisfying the family with the recipe that they were using. Then they went to the store and they got this one like item, and just like magic, the family found the meal tasty. Like that's
the
like,
deskilling of the public is something that we also talked a lot about earlier, and this is part and parcel of that, because the bottom line is that they do not want self-reliant people. They want people who are reliant on specific corporations and on capitalism more broadly, and who don't know how to fend for themselves, because that's part of how the system maintains control in totality.
Exactly. Yeah. They're quite literally just I hadn't thought to put it that way myself, but they're quite literally just trying to like not only insult the what's the words I'm looking for, like the skills of the consumer, like the literally the ability to labor, but like also by doing this, they're necessarily in some ways eroding at your willingness to even bother in the first place. Because if you can always rely on your corporate overlord to like give you a solution to what it is you're trying to do, whether it be baking a pie, cleaning the toilet, washing the stove,
or a solution to a problem you didn't even know you had until 10 seconds ago when you saw that commercial.
Exactly. If you can rely on them to always have the answer for that stuff, why even ever bother developing skills for yourself? Just turn on a fucking commercial and let them tell you what to go get or what to do. And like you said, oftentimes the problem is a hell of a lot, less bothersome than the fucking solution that they're selling you in the first place. So that's some insidious shit. Parenti spitting with this one. Let's continue. You want to do, after I finish this paragraph, you want to do selling the system?
Yeah, I'll do the next section.
Okay, cool. So the world of mass advertising teaches us that want and frustration are caused by our own deficiencies. The goods are within easy reach before our very eyes in dazzling abundance, available not only to the rich, but to the millions of ordinary citizens. Those people to partake of this cornucopia have only themselves to blame. If you cannot afford to buy these things, goes the implicit message, the failure is yours and not the system's. The advertisement of consumer wares, then, is also an advertisement for a whole capitalist system, a demonstration that the system can deliver both the goods and the good life to everyone save laggards and incompetents. And if that's the case, y'all, why the hell would you ever want to rely on anything other than the system to take care of you? The system is good, incompetent, and a blowhard and ignorant, and you only need to buy in to the system, at no extra cost to you in order for your needs to be taken care of. That is the point of capitalist consumerism and commercialism, So that's something to think about. Did you want to say anything else, Zoe, before you start reading?
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, with this last paragraph here, basically multi-level marketing is the most distilled form of, the logic of capital, because, it's this idea that, if you just, hustle and, work your contacts list, then you can, make bank too. And if it doesn't work, then that's because of your personal failings. Whereas in reality, the way the system is set up, it's set up to make money off of you, and you are set up to fail.
Exactly. That's a perfect point. Like just going back to see what it says. If you cannot afford to buy these things, goes the implicit message, the failure is yours. and not the systems. The advertisement of consumer wares then is also an advertisement for a whole capitalist system, a demonstration that the system can deliver both the goods and the good life to everyone says laggards and incompetent. So then you start thinking about stuff like discounts and coupons and all that kind of shit. And it's like these people will quite literally sell to you at a better price for you, rather than like let you fall out of the system where you feeling like you can never consume, you can never pay attention to commercials. It's always irrelevant to you. You know, they're like shit. Rather make a little bit of money off of you than no money at all. And you're thinking this is meant to be consumer friendly, but no, a coupon, a discount, something that is at first consumer friendly on the surface of things is actually an insidious way to like get you to like double down on your like relationship to like these corporate advertisers. You know, if you think of them as like always having a good deal, you'll do free PR on their behalf and keep the system just chucking along. And that's some dastardly shit. It really is.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, good question.
Come on, guys. Come on. It's okay.
It's the summer. Motherfuckers don't be feeling like doing it during the summer. I understand. Y'all will do it during the fall. It's all good.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's all good. We ain't been back active that long anyways.
So, before I start the next section, I just want to reread a sentence real quickly. Big business enhances its legitimacy and social hegemony by portraying itself as society's grand provider. That right there is the crux of it all.
Which sentence was that? Big business enhances its legitimacy and social hegemony by portraying itself as society.
Right.
That doesn't jump off as religious in nature at all. Like, what? Are we ruled by a polytheistic tribunal of gods that we call corporation? Because that's almost how they come off.
Yep.
Yeah. Like,
and the goal is for you to be dependent on them.
Exactly. The corporations are nothing but a pantheon, and I mean,
well, that's what they aspire to be.
Exactly. Hell, have they not succeeded in many ways? I mean, I suppose they haven't totally wiped out the other the competition yet in terms of so-called, the local markets and shit like that. But Jesus, they have definitely managed a dominant foothold in basically all aspects of consumer life, which consumer life itself is like a carefully constructed institution meant to, do exactly what Parenti is describing here and keeping us subservient and buying shit, that we don't need. And not to say that we don't always need it, but even the way that it gets pitched to us, it's just like, wow. And it's like not a coincidence that a lot of people these days, how many times have I been talking with my roommate Isaac, and Isaac will say something like, fuck, Jabir, like, I was just like talking with you about like shoes, or I was talking with you about magic, and then I go on Instagram and there's like the exact shoes that I was talking about in a fucking ad, or the fucking, or they'll be like trying to like get me over the TCG player to buy some new magic cards. Like, how the fuck do they know exactly what the fuck I was thinking? As if the corporate motherfuckers aren't listening at all times to your every fucking demand. They really have infiltrated every aspect of life,
Yeah. Number one, your devices are always spying on you. And number two, their algorithms are better than we think.
Second, I can help with that, just so you guys know.
No problem. Oh, you said you wanted to read, Conrad?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying like the tracking and advertising stuff. I can help teach people how to reduce that stuff. Just letting you all know.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
That'd be actually really useful. I'll get with you later to figure out what we can put together. No problem.
Yeah, totally.
I'm down for that. Figure out some sort of plan to like teach people. I need to figure out like a good sort of format for it.
Oh yeah, we got all kinds of ideas for that. I'll message you either.
I would also be interested, so keep us updated on that. I'd be interested in learning about that.
For sure. Hell yeah. All right, y'all got a lesson on how to reduce advertising being in your face to look forward to now, so we'll be looking out for that. Yeah. All right, you want to get started with selling the system?
Yeah, so selling the system. Along with products, the corporations sell themselves. By the 1970s, for the first time since the Great Depression, the legitimacy of big business was being called into question by large sectors of the public. Enduring inflation, unemployment, and a decline in real wages, the American people became increasingly skeptical about the blessings of the corporate economy. In response, corporations intensified their efforts at the kind of quote-unquote advocacy advertising designed to sell the entire capitalist system rather than just one of its products. Between 1971 and 1977, the spending on non-product related advertisements more than doubled, from $230 million to over $474 million, showing a far greater growth rate than advertising expenditures as a whole. Today, 1/3 of all corporate advertising is directed at influencing the public on political and ideological issues as opposed to pushing consumer goods. That portion is tax-deductible as a business expense, like all other advertising costs. Led by the oil, chemical, and steel companies, big business fills the airwaves and printed media with celebrations of the quote-unquote free market and warnings of the baneful effects of government regulation. Quote, "What this outpouring of eloquence seems to represent is a sweeping reactionary movement that has outgrown its earlier roots in the special interests of particular firms and become really class-wide," close quote. Mobil Oil, probably the forerunner in this area, ran ad campaigns with an annual budget of $5 million to inform readers that Mobil, quote-unquote, gave employment to thousands of persons, contributed to charities, and brought prosperity to local communities. More significantly, as some of the Mobil ads note, business firms all across America do their part to create prosperity for all. One Mobil Observations column in the Washington Post put it this way: "Business generally is a good neighbor, and most communities recognize this fact. From time to time, out of political motivations or for reasons of radical chic, individuals may try to chill the business climate. On such occasions, we try to set the record straight, and the American system, of which business is an integral part, usually adapts. So when it comes to the business climate, we're glad that most people recognize there's little need to tinker with the American system." Yeah, now that's bullshit from top to bottom.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
even when we talk about like tinkering with the Americans, like that jumped out at me.
Business is a good neighbor. I mean, tell that to all the communities who, are awash in industrial pollutants and have, sky high rates of cancer.
Right, exactly.
And these are
like,
mostly, Black and indigenous communities here in the U.S. and also in Canada.
yeah,
Who, bear the brunt of these things.
Exactly. And when I was reading it earlier this morning, like that really jumped out at me. Like, because it's almost are they distinguishing like Americanism itself a very specific style of like doing capitalism? Like, is it not functioning the same way in other countries where they're just like hyper commercialized, always on the go, always got to have like the latest shit, constantly like being peddled shit that they don't fucking need, constantly being told that like these things are like how you would necessarily even improve the community that you don't even fucking have, because most people these days don't even have community with their neighbors for the most part. You're just a couple of motherfuckers who live in proximity to each other.
Well, they have community with the products that they buy, so at least they have that.
Yeah, they got community with the corporation. What else could you possibly need, huh? Yeah, that's a good point. Let's continue.
More commodity fetishism, that's what we need.
Oh, God. You're speaking my language. Woohoo! Commodity fetishism. Yeah. All right.
Thus, capitalism and Americanism are inseparably joined in something called, quote-unquote, the American system. A few faddish radicals or individual malcontents may criticize business, but Mobil and the American system are pretty near perfect. Newsweek ran a series of ideological advertisements sponsored by, quote, the SmithKline Forum for a Healthier American Society, unquote. SmithKline is a major pharmaceutical manufacturer, by the way. The November 9, 1981 four-page ad, geez, even in 1981 dollars, that had to have been over $100,000 to buy that shit. The four-page ad on the Heroes of Growth featured the headline, quote, "Salute the capitalist entrepreneurs, says social philosopher George Gilder. They dream, then act, and enrich our lives," close quote. The text has Gilder informing us that, contrary to Adam Smith's view, quote, Capitalism is good and successful not because it miraculously transmutes personal avarice and ambition into collective prosperity, but because it calls forth, propagates, and relies upon the best and most generous of human qualities. The process of capitalist investment, for all the obvious differences, bears a close relationship with the ritual gift-giving that anthropologists have discovered to be universal in primitive life, close quote. Yeah, by that same logic, baiting a fish hook is ritual gift-giving with the fish. Jimmy says, under communism, making an annoying ad will be punishable by death. Hell yeah, I support that. Other ideological ads, like the one run by United Technologies, as an open letter to Ronald Reagan entitled Godspeed, Mr. President, called for, quote-unquote, a revitalized system of free enterprise with more reliance on, quote, the competitive forces of the marketplace, unquote, along with, quote, controlling the growth and cost of government and its intrusion into our lives and liberties, unquote. One primetime television commercial, October 1981, offers footage of a skier going down a beautiful mountain slope with a deep male off-screen voice saying, quote, freedom. We Americans have the freedom to choose, the freedom to live our lives the way we want as individuals, the freedom to take risks. Skier leaps over a precipitous embankment. The freedom to succeed. Skier makes a skillful maneuver. And the freedom to fail. Skier takes a mild spill into the powdery snow. When government comes into our lives, things change. When people look to government for protection, they get protection, but they lose some of their precious freedom. Skier at the end of the trail on less precipitous ground, moving along slowly with just his hands hanging down and his poles dragging sadly behind him. Just something to think about from the people at Getty. Close quotes. Business as a providential social force was the theme of a full-page ad by Konoko Inc. in the Christian Science Monitor, August 29, 1980. It read, "What will capital be doing on Labor Day? Working, building new plants, starting new businesses, funding innovation and growth, developing more energy to fuel the economy. Part of the capital that creates jobs comes from the earnings of American industry. Throughout the economy, stronger earnings can provide capital to create more and better jobs. So as we celebrate Labor Day, let's not forget capital. It works too. Capital is dead labor that only lives by, vampirically sucking living labor. So capital only works when it's animated by the toil of, proletarian laborers."
Whoa there, Zoe. I reject that. Capital works very hard to find a host that it can leech off of, okay? It is a hard job. You take that back right now, Missy.
It ain't easy being leechy.
Exactly.
Dracula works harder than any of us. How dare you?
Exactly. He only gets to work at night. He has to find somebody's blood to suck. Yeah, there you go.
American readers are not likely to be treated to an alternative view. No newspaper would run an advertisement pointing out that capital cannot build an industry, plant, or commodity without labor, and that when labor takes off on Labor Day, nothing is produced. Capital is the surplus value created by labor. Quote, putting one's money to work, unquote, means mixing it with labor to create more capital. Purely on its own, without labor, capital is incapable of building a woodshed, let alone, quote unquote, new plants. But the message we get is that capital creates rather than is created. Business is also depicted as society's grand protector. Defense companies spend millions in weeklies like Time and Newsweek and in the major newspapers to advertise their accomplishments in weaponry and to assure the reader that America's defenses are growing stronger thanks to the military hardware produced by this or that contractor. An advertisement in the Washington Post by, quote, McDonnell Douglas, prime contractor, unquote. McDonnell Douglas is now part of Boeing, by the way. And, quote, Northrop Corporation, principal subcontractor, unquote. Of course, Northrop's now part of Northrop Grumman, displays a photo of the latest U.S. Navy and Marine Corps fighter plane, along with the statement, reproduced here in its entirety, quote, We are convinced that we have in the FA-18A a superior aircraft. One day we use it as a fighter, and that same afternoon we use it as an attack aircraft, close quote. Fortified with this Dr. Strangelove pronouncement, Americans are supposed to sleep easier. A full-page advertisement in the Washington Post, paid for by Bath Iron Works Corporation, pictures a U.S. Navy officer's hat sitting next to a Soviet Navy officer's hat, complete with hammer and sickle emblem. The Soviet cap looks easily 10 times larger. Under the picture is the headline, "When the other fellow's 4 times bigger, it's not enough to be right." The text warns, U.S. naval strength has been declining while the Russians have been building in such numbers that they now have 4 times the number of ships we have. Our new administration has recently asserted that it's time to change the ratio. Quality ships in quantity are what we need. Ships like the guided missile frigates, FFGs, designed and built on a production line basis by Bath Iron Works. Now notice it doesn't say 4 times more of what kind of ships. I mean, if it's, 4 times more carriers, that'd be a problem, but not if it's, light cruisers and patrol boats and stuff like that. So that's what they really don't want you to ask.
Oh yeah, no, we know they keep language intentionally vague to make shit sound as insidious as possible, because they want the shit to conjure up, as we were talking about earlier, certain images, so they just say ships, and they'll let the consumer of this propaganda fill in the blanks on what that means.
Yeah. For the next few years, almost on a weekly basis, Bath Iron Works ran full-page advertisements in the New York Times and Washington Post with variations of the same warning, accompanied by photos or illustrations showing a massive lineup of Soviet ships, each with hammer and sickle emblems, next to a few paltry American vessels, or a Soviet admiral dominating the entire page, peering through his binoculars at an American vessel that presumably is his intended prey. Neither the Times nor the Post expressed an obligation to inform their readers that these advertisements might be offering something less than the truth. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the U.S. Navy has twice the tonnage of the Soviet Navy, with ships that are more modern, better equipped, and designed to transport military forces anywhere in the world. So, yeah, see there, if the Soviet Union had 4 times as many vessels as the U.S., it was all small craft.
Yeah. Jamie says dissonance to mean insurrectionary fascist in the first place. So, what ships?
Go on.
I was going to say what ships and who's using them for what, because they're not going to tell you that context.
Yep. As of 1984, the United States had 13 operational aircraft carriers equipped with 1,200 combat aircraft. The USSR had 1 full-size carrier and a few miniature ones designed for anti-submarine warfare, specifically to try to locate U.S. nuclear missile submarines that target Soviet cities. The Soviet Navy also has a very limited amphibious capacity, unlike the U.S. Navy, which is designed to deliver troops anywhere in the world. What the defense contractors sell to the public is an ideology, a fear of being harmed by some sinister foreign threat, usually the Russian bear, a promise of security through strength, an assurance that we can go on living safely as long as we don't skimp on military spending. The defense firms present benign facades, quote, where science gets down to business, unquote, says Rockwell, whose business is making plutonium triggers for atomic warheads. Quote, we bring good things to life, unquote, says General Electric, make such good things as the neutron generators that activate thermonuclear devices. Quote, we'll show you a better way, says Honeywell, whose electronic components show nuclear missiles a better way to designated targets. Another area targeted by corporate propaganda is environmentalism. The 1970s witnessed a surge in ecological consciousness in the United States. Industry responded by spending millions of dollars in a propaganda campaign designed to convince the public that business was caring for the environment. At the same time, the big corporations spent next to nothing on actual conservation and pollution controls. Yeah, wasn't there some attorney who was murdered back in the 70s for taking a major polluter to court? Anyway, we're one to judge strictly from the ads, however. Business does everything it can to avoid dumping raw industrial effusion and chemical toxins into our rivers and atmosphere. An ad by Chemical Manufacturers Association in the New York Times, May 4th, 1982, shows an attractive woman being hugged by a smiling little girl. The woman is saying, quote, "My job is managing chemical industry waste. What I do helps make the environment safer today and for generations to come," close quote. Yeah, the association probably spent more money on that ad than they did on their actual pollution controls. Of many similar ads that have appeared regularly on television and in various newspapers and news magazines, none alters the truth that the chemical industry has a dreadful record of poisoning the environment with toxic wastes. So Jamie says, isn't this what right-wingers are talking about when they talk about big left-wing tech CEOs, companies using left-wing rhetoric? Yeah, and it's all empty rhetoric, as you can see. It's more advertisement. They know what kind of language their target audience wants to hear, and so they use it, even as their actions basically are the opposite of this image that they're peddling.
I was looking into your question about trying to find a possible story about an attorney being murdered by a corporation, and I didn't find that specifically, but what ended up coming up was like a 1985 article about whether or not a corporation could commit murder at all, and it ends up like detailing about it says a trial underway in the Chicago suburb of Maywood and another beginning soon in Toms River, New Jersey, demonstrate that this attitude too has begun to change, referring to the idea that corporations don't have personhood, etc. In the New Jersey case, in which jury selection began last week, Great Adventure Inc. and the Six Flags Corporation are charged with manslaughter and the deaths of 8 teenagers in a fire at the amusement park's haunted castle in May 1984. The Illinois case marks the first time executives have actually gone on trial on charges of homicide growing out of corporate activity. On February 10th, 1983, Stephen Golub, a 59-year-old Pole who was in this country illegally, became sick and died while working at a silver reclamation plant. The now-defunct corporation, Film Recovery Systems, is charged with involuntary manslaughter. 2 company officials and 2 management-level employees are charged with murder. This question has apparently been up for debate for a long time. This is a 36-year-old article we're looking at, where they're even wrestling with the ideas that corporations can be accountable at all. So that's a interesting thing I want to bring up. And if y'all want to read about it, I guess I can post it in the Discord. So I'll do that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's ongoing murders of environmentalists throughout the global South as well.
Oh, yeah, I definitely have heard of that. Anything prominent specifically you recall? Because when I was working for Greenpeace, they would bring up those kinds of stories all the time.
So in 2019, I don't think the numbers are out for last year yet. In 2019, 212 environmental activists were killed, and that was mostly in Colombia and the Philippines.
My goodness, that's not good. Not at all. You said 212 as of 2019, and mostly Colombia.
212 in 2019, just that year.
With a disproportionate amount being in Colombia and the Philippines.
Yeah, mostly indigenous activists.
And what kind of conditions could they possibly be organizing against? I wonder. I'll have to do some research into that.
Yeah.
For sure. Jamie says corporations are people, but also incapable of doing crimes. Well, they're people for the benefit of being able to,
They're people when it benefits them in the courts, and they're not people otherwise.
Exactly. They're people when it comes to like being able to pump money into like the political system, but when it comes to like actually being held accountable by actual people, in that situation, they're not people. How are you going to hold a corporation accountable? They're unbreathing, unfeeling, and don't even exist on anything other than a piece of paper. Like that's the opportunism and like the way they argue, depending on what's going on, is just absolutely fucking. It's actually comedy. It's actually comical. If it wasn't so destructive and deadly and how it plays out in the real world, it would be funny. But it is quite deadly, unfortunately. So I posted that article from the New York Times article. It doesn't have much to talk about, but it at least mentions those cases. It's from an ER ship. And then, so we talked a little bit, and we can reference it again here. So I posted an article earlier, y'all, from fitsmallbusiness.com that talks about like what the cost of running a full-page ad is. And like Zoe and I earlier were like going fucking crazy seeing what some of these fucking costs are. So I thought I'd share that information with y'all. So, because Parenti had mentioned something along the lines of, what was it, like $8,300 for a full page ad or something like that. I might be totally misremembering what number he used. But today, a full page ad can cost anywhere, and this is as of an article published on February 1st of this year. A full page ad can cost anywhere from $2,700 to over $163,000, depending on these factors, whereas small modular ads can cost as little as $50. So print newspaper advertising cost comparison. You got the Washington Post. A price for a full page ad is about $163,422. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel is $23,688. The Bozeman Daily Chronicle, a publication out of Bozeman, Montana, is $2,772. It's not a cheap thing like for them to do, but yet corporations don't mind investing money at all in order to be able to do their propaganda, knowing that like the kind of counter propaganda that like regular people might want to fucking run, they're not going to be able to do that in any kind of full page ad. So like, just by being a corporation, they have the advantage. Because what's a $163,000 investment to like be able to get your shit out there or be able to tell a biased story about this corporate practice or that corporate practice? You know, they quite literally control the dissemination of information just by having access to capital that the average people don't have access to. So got to keep that in context as well. I think that's all I wanted to point out from here. Should I go on with, what was it? Some money isn't enough. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, sometimes money isn't enough.
Yeah, and you can finish off with that last one this time. I'll read this. So, literally the thing I just got done ranting about is about to be mentioned right now. So, advertisements by public interest groups and labor unions designed to counter the perpetual pro-business propaganda fail to gain exposure, mostly for lack of millions of dollars needed to buy television time and print space. Literally the exact same I was making. As of 1983, a full-page ad in the Washington Post cost $23,916 a day, and substantially more on Sunday. And like I said, that's as of 1983. As of right now, it's not $23,916 for a full-page ad. It's $163,422. It's absurd. And that's as of February of this year. So that's craziness. On the infrequent occasions when unions and public interest groups muster enough to buy broadcasting time or newspaper space, they may still be denied access to the media. Liberal-minded commentators have been refused radio spots even when they had sponsors who would pay. A group of scientists, politicians, and celebrities opposing the Pentagon's anti-ballistic missile ABM program was denied a half hour on television by all three major networks, even though they had the required $250,000 to buy time. Jesus. They're quite literally controlling how information gets disseminated. You come up with $250,000 to get you some time so you can do a counter narrative, and then you can still be told to fuck off. Like, that's fucking wild. On various occasions during the Vietnam era, the New York Times would not sell space to citizens groups that wanted to run advertisements against war taxes or against the purchase of defense bonds. A Times executive turned down the anti-bond advertisement because he judged it not to be in the best interest of the country. In 1983, the American Council, a Washington-based public foundation concerned with foreign policy issues, tried to buy commercial time on local affiliates of the three networks in order to run a 28-second commercial critical of U.S. involvement in El Salvador. The ABC affiliate sold 3 spots, but the NBC and the CBS affiliates refused to carry it. Broadcasters and publishers any political message for any reason, or no reason at all, regardless of how factually accurate or important it might be. During the 1980 electoral campaign, the airways were crowded with political commercials, many sponsored by pro-business, conservative, and new right organizations. In contrast, the citizens group Common Sense and National Defense prepared a 99-word spot commercial dealing with the danger of nuclear war by computer error, calling for a freeze on nuclear weapons. In the last week of the campaign, the group set out to buy airtime for the commercial in 3 senatorial and 7 House races in an effort to defeat incumbents who had opposed the nuclear freeze. Some stations did not respond. Others agreed to carry the spot, then canceled at the last moment. In the end, voters in only 3 of the 10 electoral contests got to see the commercial. Among the reasons given by broadcasters for turning down the message were too controversial. How an incumbent voted on the nuclear freeze does not constitute a controversial issue of public importance. Not in the best interest of the station to run it. I don't think this is the style that the people of Wyoming like. In my judgment, it is not in the interest of the populace of Wyoming. They would not understand. All the stations were acting within their court-given rights. Non-candidates have no guaranteed right of access to the airwaves. Broadcasters can run any political commercials they might want, no matter how emotionally derogatory, and they can refuse to run any spot without having to give a reason. That's wild. So, like, it seems like the only honest reason they gave here is not being in the best station of the interest of the station to run it. Because, like, this idea that the issue is too controversial seems to be nonsense, or how it, like, y'all motherfuckers run off of controversy, fucking anything to get the clicks and the revenue coming in. And I'm like, you know, even if you lose a so-called advertiser, you know, how many more are going to line up because you run those kind of stories? You know, the defense industry would be fucking salivating at the chance to like run spots on your fucking network. In that fucking case, incumbent voted on the nuclear freeze does not constitute a controversial issue of public importance. Like, are you serious? Like, public officials voting publicly on issues of public importance is not an actual controversial issue of public importance. Like, that sounds like a fucking, that just sounds like corporate doublespeak to me. I don't know how that shit hit y'all's ears, but I'm like, oh, okay. I guess the public doesn't need to know. And then this one's the most grotesque. I don't think this is in a style that the people of Wyoming like. In my judgment, it is not in the interest of the populace of Wyoming. They would not understand how to call the populace stupid without calling the populace stupid, because that's what they're fucking trying to do here. You know, the idea that like they're not able to understand supposedly complex political issues, which in some of these cases, they're not complex political issues at all. They're quite easy to understand if you wanted to actually explain it to people. But, you know, pretending that you don't want to like confuse the people who are consuming the advertisement is a real good way to try to pretend that you actually have the interest of your viewership in mind, and that you're just looking out for them preemptively by like not bombarding them with so-called too much political stuff. You know, it's fucking wild. Did you want
my
to go?
judgment, it is not in the interest of the populace of Wyoming. Well, sure, I guess, you know, since Wyoming's not going to be a priority target in the event of a nuclear war, why not?
Yeah, you know, I'm sure that's the spin they would put on it for sure. Like, no, if you were in you know, maybe people in New York would care, but like not people in Wyoming. Like, oh, okay. Well, thanks for that grand insight. You want to wrap us up here with public service for private interest?
Yeah, so public service for private interests. Not all airtime is given to commercial gain. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, requires broadcasters to set time aside for, quote, public service announcements, unquote. The obligation is a vague one. The FCC has never denied any station its license for failing to live up to it, despite complaints from community and public interest groups. About 3% of airtime, worth $500 million annually, is given to public service announcements. This free time, like the millions of dollars worth of free space donated by newspapers and magazines, is monopolized by the Advertising Council, a nonprofit corporation funded and directed by corporations, bankers, and network officials. Its board of directors reads like a who's who of big business. with representatives from such major advertisers as Procter & Gamble, General Motors, General Mills, General Electric, and General Foods. A subcommittee of the Advertising Council, the Industries Advisory Committee, at one count composed of 28 bankers and 54 major corporate executives, sets the ideological tone for all advertising campaigns. No public interest groups are represented on the council's board, though. Even when it's quote-unquote public service announcements, they've still got you, and they're still feeding you their agenda.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. Like, oh, well, who the fuck is sitting on these boards is a real good question when asking, here's a PSA really in the actual interest of the public, or is even that doing like corporate propaganda? Because almost certainly it's probably the latter.
The Advertising Council is the second largest advertiser in the world, behind Procter & Gamble. Since its formation in 1941, it has used more than $10 billion worth of free, quote, public service, unquote, advertising donated by radio, television, newspapers, and magazines. While supposedly nonpartisan and non-political, the Council's public service commercials laud the blessings of free enterprise and urge viewers to buy U.S. savings bonds. The ads tell us that business is, quote, doing its job, unquote, and hiring the handicapped, veterans, minorities, and the poor, when in fact business makes little voluntary effort on behalf of such groups. Workers are exhorted to take pride in their work and produce more for their employers, but nothing is said about employers paying more to the workers. The Advertising Council has waged a, quote, food, nutrition, and health campaign whose ads urge viewers to send in for a free booklet entitled Food is More Than Just Something to Eat. The booklet fails to mention that Americans eat too much processed food, sugar, and junk food. Instead, it cheerily announces, quote, fresh or frozen, canned or dried, instant or from scratch. Which foods have the nutrients, which do not? They all do, close quote. Council ads offer cosmetic solutions to serious social problems, thereby trivializing the nature of the problems. Unemployment? It can be reduced with quote-unquote better job training. Crime? Lock your car after parking it and secure your front door. Hazardous and costly automobile transportation? Fasten your safety belt. Ecology and conservation? Listen to Smokey the Bear and prevent forest fires. Industry's devastation of the environment? Do not litter. The council's slogan is, quote, people start pollution and people can stop it, close quote. The ads blame pollution on everyone in general, thus avoiding placing any blame on industry in particular. The council's Keep America Beautiful campaign of 1983 was coordinated by the public relations director of Union Carbide, a chemical manufacturer and major polluter. Throughout the council's diverse range of messages runs one underlying theme. Personal charity, individual effort, and neighborly goodwill can solve any mess. Collectivist, class-oriented political action and governmental regulations are not needed in a land of self-reliant volunteers. In the 1970s, with funds from the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Advertising Council launched campaigns to educate Americans about the blessings of private enterprise and the evils of inflation. Some 13 million booklets distributed to schools, workplaces, and communities and reprinted in newspapers across the nation informed readers that only they could whip inflation and make the system work better by themselves working harder, producing more, and shopping smarter. The anti-inflation campaign, reaching some 70 million Americans, listed government regulation as the primary cause of inflation. The solution was to keep the lid on wages and prices and roll back regulations. Yeah, we see how that turned out. The Ad Council's campaigns seemed to have an effect on public opinion. In 1975, 22% of those polled thought there was too much government regulation. By 1979, 50%, and in 1980, 60%. By the 1980 electoral campaign, deregulation had become a widespread, ready-made theme utilized to advantage by presidential candidate Ronald Reagan. Those who wished to make monopoly profits, occupational safety, unemployment, and environmental protection the central themes of popular debate have no way of reaching the mass audiences. The public service airtime that could be used by conservationists, labor, consumer, and other public interest groups has been preempted by a business-dominated advertising council that passes off its one-sided ideological ads as non-controversial, non-political, and in the public interest. As one liberal congressman complained, quote, "The ad council and the networks have corrupted the original intent of public service time by turning it into a free bonus for special interests. The ad council is a propagandist for business and government, and with staggering control of the media, it not only makes sure its own side of the story is told, but that the other side isn't. The public has no meaningful access to the media," close quote. Yeah, like we were discussing earlier, deregulation is, of course, what led to the savings and loan crisis of the 80s and 90s, in which tens of thousands of retirees lost their life savings. The bailout cost taxpayers, billions and billions of dollars, and there was a rash of connected suicides. So it was an ugly situation.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, the people who supported deregulation, the public, they didn't even, really know what they were talking about. Like, they don't know what areas are, supposedly overregulated. They don't know where all this government regulation is or what it does, but, all they know is that there's too much of it.
Yeah, I mean that's purposeful. If you just put buzzwords in people's head but never give them any details, they'll run with the propaganda for you. You don't even have to disseminate that propaganda yourself. They will literally just be like, "Well, too much regulation is bad. Deregulate," and next thing you know, they're deregulating everything and saying, "Well, that's what the public wanted us to do. We were just responding to the will of the people," even though in actuality, they were responding to the will of the corporations, and so that's some dastardly shit. Get people to advocate against their own interests in a subtle way through advertisement, and then blame those people for why you did it. Like that's crazy as hell. Because if you do it that way, what can't you justify? You could justify any goddamn thing, and that's insidious. Did we finish up, or did you still have a little bit to go?
Yeah, that's the end of the chapter.
Yeah, good shit. Yeah, so Jamie said inflation is literally something corporations do. Absolutely, inflation is literally something corporations do. That's not even up for debate. Did you want to comment on the inflation point, Zoe?
Nah, I mean that covers it pretty well.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think that's it for chapter 4, y'all. This 2:00 slot was pretty successful. We got a few more people in here than we did last week for sure. So we'll keep up with the 2:00 slot for now. And yeah, we'll have the Parenti reading up at the same time that we typically do, about a day or two ahead of next Saturday. So thank y'all for being here with us. Y'all comrades know I love y'all. Solidarity always, and I'll see y'all in the coming days for all of the other readings we got going on. Take care.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, everyone. Solidarity.